Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmad Yasya Yato Nivayad Itaratas Charte Svavigyaswarat.
Janmadyasya yatam vayaritartas chatir svavigyasvarat.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Uyanti Atsurayaha.
Tenne Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Mujanti Jasuraya.
Tejo Vari Madam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Sargom Risha.
Tejo Varim Hridaya Yata Vinimayo Jatra Tritsak.
Damna Srina Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirhasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of
O
Vasudeva.
all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
For my respectful obeisance unto you.
For my respectful obeisance unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute
and the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It is the only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji.
The original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
Of water seen in fire or land seen on water.
Or the water seen in fire, land seen in water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of him do the material universe.
Temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Lord Krishna,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
which is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the
Dharma projita kaitravota.
Dharma projita kaitravota.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Vedyam vastavam atra vastu.
Vedam vastu vastra.
Shivadam tapa trayonmulanam.
Shivadam tapo trayonmulanam.
Śrīmad-Bhāgavate Mahamuni Krite.
Śrīmad-Bhāgavate Mahamuni Krite.
Kimva Purer Ishvaraha.
Kimva Purer
Sadyo Hridi Avarujyate tra.
Sadhurudya Avarujyate tra.
Kriti Bihi Susursubistakshanat.
Kriti Bihi Susursubistakshanat.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities from material
This
motives.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, their reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare
Such
of all.
truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by great sage Vyasadeva's maturity
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpatora galitam phalam,
sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam,
Shukama kahadam ritatravu sangitam,
pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Pibata bhagavatam rasamrayam,
muhur aho raska bhuvi bhavakaha.
Muruho rasika.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam.
Relish
The mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures.
the mature fruit, the desired tree of the Vedic
It
literature.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shishugureva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Even though its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
although his nectar is for relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Swakata Krishna.
Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hridyantaksto hi abhadrani.
Hridyantastu hiya bhadrani.
Vidunati Srihitsatam.
Vidunati Srihitsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
it's set for righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
For one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who's dwelling in everyone's heart,
and Lord Krishna dwelling within everyone,
acts as a best wishing friend
acts as the best wishing.
and purifies a devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
God is constantly engaged in hearing.
Nasta prayesu abhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashloke
Bhagavati Uttamasloke,
bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nasti.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
This way devotion naturally develop his dharma transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam,
and from the devotees,
from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava,
kamalobhadayaschaye
Kamalobhastaish,
cheta etayaranavidam
Taitarnavidam.
stitvam sattve prasidati. By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
or the passion of
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and so us and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasana manasa,
bhagavat bhakti yogataha bhagavat tattva vijnana mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away,
when these impurities are wiped away,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure good,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
chidyante sarva samsaya,
Chidyante sarva samshaya,
shiyante chasya karmani,
Chidyante sachakarmani,
drishta evat manishware.
Druta evatmanishvara.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga severs the hardness of material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables one to come at once to the stage of samshimshmagana,
understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality of Godhead.
understanding the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee and Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna.
Can one understand the science of Krishna?
Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, text number 13. Ekaikaso angani dhyānubhavavet bhavavet
Ekaika shungani niyamubhavayet
padadhyavad dasitam gadabrita
padadhyavad dashitam kadavrita
jitam jitam stanam apoya darayet
jitam jitam stanamapoya dharayet
param param sudhyati diryata yata.
param param sudhyati dhiryata yatha.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation should be concentrated upon the lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way higher and higher. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of the limbs, one after another, the more the intelligence becomes purified. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The process of meditation recommended in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is not to fix one's attention on something impersonal or void. The meditation should concentrate on the person of the Supreme Godhead, either in his virāṭ-rūpa, the gigantic universal form, or in his sac-cid-ānanda-vigraha as described in the scriptures. There are, look, first of all, this is explaining the real meaning of meditation. So what Mayavadis are doing, what the yoga schools are doing, it's all nonsense. It has nothing to do with what the real meditation is. There are authorized descriptions of Vishnu forms, and there are authorized representations of deities in the temples. Thus, one can practice meditating upon the deity, concentrating his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord, and gradually rising higher and higher up to his smiling face. So when we see the deities in the morning, in darshan, we should always begin from the feet and slowly go up to the smiling face. According to the Bhagavata school, the Lord's rāsa dancing is the smiling face of the Lord. Since it is recommended in this verse that one should gradually progress from the lotus feet up to the smiling face, we shall not jump at once to understand the Lord's pastimes in the rāsa dance. It is better to practice concentrating our attention by offering flowers and tulsi to the lotus feet of the Lord. In this way, we gradually become purified by the archana process. So now, we have heard the word gradually many, many times in Prabhupada's purports, in direct connection to how to become Krishna conscious. We cannot jump artificially to the Rasa Leela dance, as many people like to do. And I've told this story before. Once in Nellore, Prabhupada was a guest in the house of his husband, pious husband and wife. And after the program was over in the evening, and around maybe, I think, 12 o'clock at night, the couple came to Prabhupada's room and asked if they could see him. And he was translating at that time, but he said, okay. So they came into his room, they sat down in front of him, and there were just those two and Prabhupada. And they said, Srila Prabhupada, you are such a exalted personality. Please tell us the confidential pastimes of Radha and Krishna and the gopis' Rasa Leela dance. And Prabhupada said, it's a fact. He said, I don't really understand it myself, so I can't really explain it to you. And they were shocked. And but you're Acharya, you know everything. He said, I don't know Rasa Leela. In other words, he refused to explain it because they were coming for sense gratification, not to actually make spiritual advancement. They were thinking that, we'll go and hear about this sexual affairs of Krishna, as if it's something, that it's entertainment in a sense. So Prabhupada refused to talk to him. I mean, these are very confidential things. It's not to be discussed in public. It's only supposed to, Lord Chaitanya himself only discussed these things with select devotees who were very intimate and actually surrendered completely. Like, for example, Ramananda Rai. He asked Ramananda Rai to explain the glories of Radha and Krishna and the gopis' intimate pastimes. And Ramananda Rai said, my dear Lord, he said, I actually don't understand these things. If I explain something, it's only because you're putting the words in my mouth. So this is confidential knowledge, and if an unqualified person hears it, then they become more contaminated. They don't get purified, they become more contaminated. According to the Bhagavata school, the Lord's rasa dancing is the smiling face of the Lord, since it is recommended in this verse that one should gradually progress from the lotus feet up to the smiling face. We shall not jump at once to understand the Lord's pastimes in the rasa dance. It is better to practice concentrating our attention by offering flowers and tulasi to the lotus feet of the Lord. In this way, we gradually become purified by the archana process. Archana means worship process. We dress the Lord, bathe him, etc. And all these transcendental activities help us purify our existence. When we reach the higher standard of purification, if we see the smiling face of the Lord or hear the rasa dance, pastimes of the Lord, then we can relish his activities. In the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, therefore, the rasa dance pastimes are delineated in the 10th canto, chapters 29 to 34. The more one concentrates on the transcendental form of the Lord, either on the lotus feet, the calves, the thighs, or the chest, the more one becomes purified. In this verse, it is clearly stated, the more the intelligence becomes purified, which means the more one becomes detached from sense gratification. Our intelligence, in the present conditioned state of life, is impure due to being engaged in sense gratification. The result of meditation on the transcendental form of the Lord will be manifested by one's detachment from sense gratification. Therefore, the ultimate purpose of meditation is purification of one's intelligence. Okay, so this is another definition. The ultimate purpose of meditation is purification of one's intelligence. It's not to improve one's health. It's not to engage in better sex. It's not anything other than the purification of one's intelligence. And purification of intelligence means detachment from sense gratification. This is unbelievable how much they have deviated the meaning of meditation. You have meditation schools that teach a person to engage in sense gratification as the purpose of it. It's unbelievable how much people have deviated from the real meaning. In other words, relaxation, diminished stress, blah, blah, blah. All these material purposes for meditation, that's not the meaning of meditation. So therefore, we see that we have to relearn the meaning of words by reading Prabhupada's and Krishna's words. Because people have, they've basically, what you could say, committed highway robbery by taking these words and giving them much deviant explanations, so that people, like, do a little experiment. Ask someone that you know, and say, do you know what's the purpose of meditation? What do you think they would say?
Calming the mind.
Calming the mind, yes. Yeah. Yes. Well, they say all kinds of things. That's one thing they probably would say, but there are other things they can say. I don't want to say too much about this because it becomes too gross, but there are people who use meditation techniques for sense gratification. Especially those people who claim to be experts in the Kama Sutra. And it's completely nonsense. They're false explanations of the Kama Sutra and what that's meant for, which is a type of meditation. Those who are too engrossed in sense gratification cannot be allowed to participate in archana. Archana means worshipping of the deity, or to touch the transcendental form of the Radha, Krishna, or Vishnu deities. For them, it is better to meditate upon the gigantic virāṭ-rūpa of the Lord. as recommended in the next verse. The impersonalists and avoiders are therefore recommended to meditate upon the universal form of the Lord, whereas the devotees are recommended to meditate on the deity worship in the temple. Because the impersonalists and voidists are not sufficiently purified in their spiritual activities, archana is not meant for them. Well, that's, as Prabhupada is explaining, that's why to be able to actually go on the altar and dress the deities, all these things, one has to be free of the desire for sense gratification. If you go there and are still beleaguered by sense gratification, you're going to commit many offenses. I saw this happen once. This was in Berkeley, California, and this one person became a devotee. He was a black devotee, and we trained him, and he started doing deity worship. He came off the street. He was a very fallen person, but he followed the rules and regulations. And but he started to associate with fallen people, secretly. We didn't really know it, but we found out when one day he dropped one of the deities during the worship, and after that it was all downhill, and eventually he got AIDS, and it was horrible what happened to him. Once he got AIDS, he left the temple, and then parts of his body started to fall off, like his fingers. They atrophied and fell off, and his toes and things like that, and eventually he died in a very miserable condition. Very miserable condition. So, you see, it's better not to go on the altar as long as one is, thinking about sense gratification. It's a very dangerous thing to do. And Prabhupada says, look what he says. He says, for them, meaning the impersonalists, it's better to meditate upon the gigantic virāṭ-rūpa of the Lord, as recommended in the next verse. The impersonalists and the voidists are therefore recommended to meditate upon the universal form of the Lord, whereas the devotees are recommended to meditate on the deity worship in the temple. Because the impersonalists and voidists are not sufficiently purified in their spiritual activities, archana is not meant for them. Those who are too engrossed in sense gratification cannot be allowed to participate in archana or to touch the transcendental form of the Radha, Krishna, or Vishnu deities. For them, it is better to meditate upon the gigantic virāṭ-rūpa. So, you see, it's a pretty serious thing to go on the altar and still be attached to sense gratification. And some dire things can happen to a person who does that. So, I know it's not meant to scare anybody, but I'm telling you a real-life experience that I saw with my own eyes. And this person made a lot of good spiritual advancement, and we were all very pleased because, he was a person off the street. He was very fallen, and he got initiated after a year and a half being in the temple and following all the rules and regulations. What was his downfall? Why did he go from that position of being a pujari to getting AIDS, and then parts of his body atrophied and fell off and died in miserable? Because he's associated again with bad people. And he did it secretly. And anyway, I won't go into any more details about it, but it was horrible. And he ruined it. Everything was ruined for him. So, that's why it says in the 6th chapter, 46th verse, it says that a jnani is better than a karmi, or karma yogi. And better than the jnani is the devotee. So there are gradations of people according to, their level of understanding. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. So you have the karma yogi who's still attached to sense gratification and material benefits. And then you have the empiricist is a person who's engaging in yagyas for material benefit. I'm sorry, first is the fruitive worker who's not a devotee. Then you have the karma yogi who's still attached to the fruits of labor. And then you have the very renounced yogi engaged in Ashtanga yoga. And above all of them is the yogi who's actually a devotee, right? So, therefore, when Krishna says ultimately that yoginam apisarve samadgatanantaratmana shraddhavam bhajate yomam samayuktatamo matak. Who is the highest amongst all these yogis is the person who with great faith, now this is an essential word when we talk about a genuine devotee, who with great faith always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So, number one, has great faith. Number two, always follows the Lord's instructions. Number three, always thinks of the Lord and Guru and Krishna within himself. And number four, always renders transcendental loving service. So that such a person is most intimately related to the Lord. So everything begins, Prabhupada says, this is the conclusion, that of all yogis, who is the one who is always thinking of Krishna is called Shraddhavan. He has faith in the Lord, strong faith. So faith is the beginning of everything in spiritual life. Faith, or Shraddha, in the beginning means a liking, a appreciation of devotees and what they're doing. And from that comes respect. It doesn't mean that you're fully convinced yet, but you appreciate the association you've had with devotees and you have respect for them. And Prabhupada says, if you have no respect for Krishna, if you have no faith in Krishna, there's no advancement of spiritual life or yoga life. Therefore it is said, Shraddhavan, Ado Shraddha. In the beginning, there must be some faith, some appreciation, some respect for devotees and for Krishna. The beginning of spiritual life is Shraddha, or faith. And first of all, faith, and faith has been described by Krishnadas Kaviraj. Faith means vishvasa. What does that mean? So, Shraddha means firm faith. Vishvasa means firm faith. I'm convinced. As Krishna says, Sarvadharman parityaja mamekam saranam vraja. Just surrender unto me, and all your problems will go away. That's Krishna's point. So unless one has got this faith that if I surrender, then all my problems in life are going to be solved, and I can attain perfection in this life. Why one should consider himself, I must be completely surrendered to Krishna? It's only because they've developed faith. They trust the words of Krishna, and they trust the devotees who have helped them understand Krishna. So faith is the beginning. And to create faith, Krishna has explained the whole Bhagavad Gita. Question after question of Arjuna is answered by Krishna. Arjuna is beginning with very little or no faith. But at least he has the good sense to surrender to Krishna to try and figure out what's the best course of action for him. Although he refuses to follow Krishna's order in the beginning, but he has the good sense to surrender to the Lord and question him. And if all those questions are answered properly, then he's ready to surrender. So, if I surrender to Krishna, then all my business will be perfect. All my spiritual life will be perfect. Therefore, Krishna says, Shraddhavan bhajate, with Shraddha, with full faith. So beginning is faith. If one develops a little Shraddha, Prabhupada says, just like we're giving a chance throughout the whole world by this propaganda, opening temples to create little Shraddha in the minds of people. And if the Shraddha is there, if the faith is there, the next stage is sadhu sangha, associating with devotees. If one wants to become Krishna conscious, if he's developed a little faith in Krishna consciousness, then the next stage is to associate with sadhu. But who is a sadhu? See, now Prabhupada is giving all these definitions. What is meditation? What is faith? And now, what is a sadhu? Sadhu means very tolerant. In another place, sadhu is described in Bhagavad Gita, bhajate mam ananyabhak, sadhu eva samantavya, apichet sudaracharo bhajanti mam ananyabhak. Sadhu, so that means that, it's the 9th chapter, 30th verse. Let's take a look at that. It says, so the sadhu is someone who's very tolerant. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. That's an important statement, properly situated in his or her determination. In other words, even though they may have committed some mistakes, they do not leave Krishna consciousness, but they continue. Just like I remember one amazing thing that I witnessed when there was this very, very exalted sannyasi who was president of a temple also, and he was a BBT trustee, and he was a sannyasi. In other words, he had all the titles, right? Every big title you could get in Krishna consciousness. And he was considered like a very intimate devotee of Srila Prabhupada. All of a sudden, he got involved with this woman who claimed to be the daughter of the founder of Toyota. So everyone got all excited, and she was coming to the temple all the time, and then they built up this relationship, and finally he asked Prabhupada if he could marry her. Now he's a sannyasi, and then she was promising, that her daddy would give like big bucks to ISKCON. Now, it was amazing. Prabhupada agreed. And he performed the marriage ceremony. There's pictures of this. There's photographs of this, performing the marriage ceremony. And then afterwards, he and she lived in the temple. He continued to be temple president. He was no longer a sannyasi. And after some time, the devotees would, clean their room, take their trash out and everything. They started to see chicken bones in the trash. This was like unbelievable. This is in the temple. They were living in the temple. So some of the senior devotees spoke to the man, and he said, "Look, what's this? We're finding these chicken bones in your trash." He said, "Oh, well, what's the difference? You get milk from the cow, and it comes from the cow. So this is, what's the difference between the milk or the meat? He said something like that, you know. So devotees were bewildered by what he said. So they wrote to Prabhupada, see, when in doubt, contact Guru, you know, Siksha or Diksha Guru. So they wrote to Prabhupada, this is what he said. And Prabhupada wrote back and said, yes, milk is coming from the cow and stool is coming from the cow. So why doesn't he eat stool also? You know, so then the devotees, you know, the cloud of confusion went away, and they confronted him, and they said, "Look, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. You know, this lady has completely corrupted you, and you know, if this continues, you have to leave the temple, right?" They didn't say leave Krishna consciousness; they said you have to leave the temple. So he left with this lady. And I'm not even going to go through the rest of the story. It's all horrible. They did come back at one time, and then, but I won't say the rest of it. So anyway, you see, sometimes, now why would Prabhupada accept for him to get married after he was a sannyasi and given some, because that's a very horrible thing for a sannyasi to do. Because of this verse, even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he's properly situated in his determination. So the point was, okay, don't be, you know, no one should criticize him if he continues in devotional service. Okay, it's not a nice thing. It's considered, there's a statement for a sannyasi who gets married. He's no longer a sannyasi, he's a vantasi. Vantasi in Sanskrit means someone who eats stool, right? Or no, eats his own puke, I'm sorry, eats his own puke, right? But, okay, but if he's going to continue in devotional service, then it's, I mean, you know, it's not a good thing to do, but at least we can not criticize him because he's going to be rightfully situated. But instead of continuing and being an honorable sannyasi, he degraded some more, and that was intolerable, right? Because it's a what you would call a pattern of abuse or of the rules and regulations. So that cannot be tolerated. There can be you know, one fall down or maybe two fall downs, but you know, it can't be a pattern of falling down. That cannot be excused. So this verse is a very important verse because the idea is that no matter how bad one falls down, if they continue in devotional service and get you know, good association and advice how to correct themselves and live decently, then one should not criticize such a person. That's why sadhu means someone who's very patient and tolerant. Titikshava karunika, surhida sarvadehinam, ajita satprava santa sadhava sadhubhusana. This is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 3:25-21. So, sadhu is someone who's staunch and devoted to Krishna. So that's the basic definition of sadhu, and he's very tolerant, and he doesn't you know, jump to conclusions to condemn anyone right away. He's always willing to be merciful and to help people, understanding that, you know, we come from very low backgrounds, so therefore it's possible that we may, by being a little negligent, fall down. But if we're willing to take proper instruction and continue in devotional service, one should be forgiven and given that chance. Okay, so this associating with genuine sadhus is absolutely essential for advancement in spiritual life, for progressive spiritual life. So Prabhupada says, if we can associate with a real sadhu, which means real devotee, unadulterated devotee, Anyabilasita sunyam jnana karmadya navritam anukulyena krishnada silnam bhaktir uttamas. So someone who is always engaged in devotional service and associating with good devotees, then perfection will come. It'll be progressive. Simply by associating. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastrikai, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhihai. By associating with genuine sadhus, one can attain perfection in spiritual life. Simply by this association. So, everything in spiritual life begins with a little faith. And Prabhupada said, we've opened these temples around the world to help so many people develop a little bit of faith in Krishna and Guru, and thus begin the process of devotional service. So these are the steps. First is a little faith, then associating with devotees, then understanding from the devotees the importance of initiation and accepting bona fide Shiksha and Diksha Gurus, and then one goes to, then one clears away all the anarthas, unwanted things, unnecessary things. And in the association of devotees, there's satam prasanga mamavirya samido bhavanti hit karnas rasayanakata. This is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 3:25-25. Satam prasanga. This is an important verse, but there's a similar verse like this in the Bhagavad Gita. It's verse number 10, which says that matchita matkita pranat bodhyantas parasparam katyantas chamam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. It says that the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. That is the life of a devotee. Devotees are always enlivening one another by talking about Krishna and his transcendental pastimes. And you learn something all the time, and there's something new every day in the association of devotees, because their only interest is Krishna and Krishna consciousness. They don't really have any other interest in life, right? Even though they might have a family, even though they work, but their real interest, their real focus is Krishna. So pure devotees, whose characteristics are mentioned here, their thoughts are always dwelling on Krishna, their lives are fully devoted to Krishna's service, they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about Krishna. So these are the characteristics of a devotee. They're fully engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. Their talks are solely on the transcendental subjects. The symptoms of the pure devotees are described in this verse specifically. Devotees of the Supreme Lord are 24 hours daily engaged in glorifying the qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna, and they take pleasure in discussing him with other devotees. So this is real sadhu sangha. So first there's faith, then there's sadhu sangha, then there's bhajana kriya, taking initiation, and then there's anartha nivriti, getting rid of all unnecessary things in one's life and all bad habits, giving them up one by one. And this happens because we downsize intelligently. So Prabhupada says, unnecessary things, when they are too much strong, that becomes sinful life. So if we accumulate unnecessary things, we'll end up becoming sinful. Unnecessary. The modern civilization is simply meant for creating unnecessary necessities of life. Unnecessary necessities. That's called an oxymoron in English. Unnecessary necessities, right? That's all. So we are becoming deviated from God. The more we are advancing in so-called material civilization, we are more becoming far away from God. Therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung a beautiful bhajan and says, Jada Vidya Jato Mayara Vaibhav Tomara Bhajane Bhada. Jada Vidya. The material education is simply paraphernalia of this illusory energy, Mayara Vaibhav. In other words, material, we keep coming back to this subject all over the place in Prabhupada's books. It's not that I am particularly harping on it. Prabhupada himself is talking about this in many, many different places. In fact, we wrote a whole little book about it. And this particular poem by Bhaktivinoda Thakur is extremely important because he is an acharya, a top acharya, and he says, Jada Vidya Jatu Mayara Vaibhav. The more we make advancement in temporary materialistic comforts, and why do we do that? Because we're convinced by material education that is the right path. The more we become implicated in unnecessary things, and they are all impediments for making progress in spiritual life. That is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's opinion. And that's a fact. We have seen in Western countries, they are still more materially advanced, but spiritually they are dull, blockheaded spiritually. Very difficult to convince them spiritually. So sadhu sangha, by association sadhus, one can achieve advancement in spiritual life, and in all shastras it is recommended that one must associate with genuine sadhus. Chanakya Pandit, the great politician, he also says, Tyaja durjana sangam, Tyaja durjana sangam, bhaja sadhu samagamam. He says, give up association with bad elements. What are the bad elements? That is also explained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. A devotee asked him that what should be the behavior of a person who is spiritually inclined, or a Vaishnava. Spiritually inclined means Vaishnava. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnava Char. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 2287. Those who are interested in spiritual life or to become a devotee, the first business is to give up the association of bad elements. Asat Sangha Tyaga Vaishnava Achar. In one line, Lord Chaitanya explains. Then next question is, who is asat? Who is a bad element or non-devotee? Asat eka Sri Sangi Krishna Abhakta Ara. He has described who is asat, or not a good person. Sri Sangi. Sri Sangi means those who are unnecessarily addicted to women. That would be men. Men who are unnecessarily addicted to women, who are engaged in all kinds of philandering and all kinds of nonsense activity. They are considered asat, bad elements, bad association. One should be married. One must have children. That is not illicit association. But otherwise, Krishna also says, Dharma viruddha kamosmi, he says, kama, lust or sex life, which is not against religious principles, that is representative of Krishna, right? That kind of lust I am, Krishna says. So according to a religious system, people should not be cats and dogs and hogs in the matter of sex life. They must have married wife, married husband, and only for nice children they should unite. These are the descriptions given by the Vimsati Prakara Dharma Shastra Manu Samhita, not otherwise. So he's quoting now the Manu Samhita, which is the book, the Vedic book of how to organize one's life, right? So therefore, this is called Grihastha Ashrama. Ashrama. There's Sannyasa Ashrama, there's Grihastha Ashrama, there's Vanaprastha Ashrama, Everything is ashrama. We can understand as soon as this word is used, ashrama, it means there is some spiritual tint or spiritual life. So grihasta, that is also spiritual life. One may be with wife and children and execute spiritual life. All the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they were all grihastas. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself was also a grihasta. So to become grihasta is not a disqualification, but to live as a grihasta according to the injunction of the Shastras, that is required. That Krishna says, Dharma viruddho kamosmi, that which is not against religious principle, that sort of lust I am. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Asat eka Sri Sangi, that means one who is not satisfied with his wife and is seeking other women. Well, the misleading or false sampradayas, there's 13 of them in Bengal, they take this verse and they say, you see, asat means eka Sri Sangi, one who's attached only to one woman. Therefore, you must be attached to many women. That is, then you are sat. You see how they twist things around? Right? And that's why you have sadhus or you have babajis that have 2 or 3 or 4 girlfriends. You see? And that's why you have so many Mayavadi sannyasis. They get caught engaging in illicit sex. So, and they quote this verse. See, he says only one woman, eka sangi, eka Sri Sangi. Therefore, you should have many women. That's not what it means, though. It means that one may be married with one wife, but if he's attached to sense gratification, even with that one wife or with many women, that person is bad association. Okay, so we'll stop right there and we'll continue more tomorrow. But Prabhupada's point is, a little bit later on, he says, there is no education, there's no science, because we do not understand that we are living entities, we are part and parcel of Krishna. See, they don't teach that in school, that we have an eternal soul and we're part and parcel of Krishna. They don't mention that. But that's the beginning of spiritual life. That's the beginning of the science of Krishna, that all the living entities have eternal souls like Krishna, and we are part and parcel of Krishna, so we're meant to serve Krishna. See, that's our whole constitutional position. They don't teach that in school. They teach everyone that you don't have a soul, you just have a material body, and God is a fiction. If you feel better in believing in God, that's okay, whatever feels good. This is nonsense, right? They want to be liberal. They say, you can believe in God if it makes you feel good. Well, this is nonsense. You know, what kind of people are these? They're not even people. They're animals. Animals that are dressed nicely. That's all they are. But their whole habits, their whole thinking process is demoniac, because they're denying the existence of God, right? So the two fundamental things that a child should learn in school is that, one, you're not this body, you are an eternal soul. And two, your soul is part and parcel of Krishna. That's the beginning of knowledge. That's the beginning of Bhagavad Gita also, teaching. Okay, we'll stop right there. We'll go to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.